place in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. My father wants me to enter the palace and serve an emperor 30 years my senior, solely to pave the way for the legitimate daughter he cherishes. How foolish would I have to be to agree to such a thing? Wouldn't it be a far better bargain to bear a son myself, raise him to be emperor, and become the Empress Dowager in my own right? My name is Evelyn Sheng, the second legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's estate. Prime Minister Sheng intends for me to enter the palace and attend to the emperor, a man who has ruled this land for over 20 years. He has already entered middle age, indeed, he is old enough to be my own father. His harem houses hundreds of beauties, and his princes and princesses are too numerous to count. If I possessed a shred of rationality, I would absolutely refuse this absurd proposition. However, crying, making a scene, or threatening suicide would only make me appear uncultivated. I wished to argue for a reason, yet no one would stand forward to demand justice on my behalf. I felt like a trapped beast, struggling endlessly yet unable to escape this gilded cage. Madame Sheng advised me, Evelyn, your sister is not as intelligent as you are, nor is she as skilled in calculation. Although Isabella possesses beauty capable of toppling kingdoms, she is now betrothed to Prince Nicholas. Evelyn, you are a sensible child. For the sake of this family, for your sister, and even for the prince, please endure this slight grievance. I had long been aware of her bias, but I never imagined she could utter such ridiculous words so nonchalantly. Without a change in expression or tone, I looked at her coldly and offered a reminder. Mother, I am also betrothed. My fiancé is the eldest son of the C family, Theodore C. He is elegant and possesses outstanding scholarship. He has written letters and composed poems for me, where every word was deeply sentimental, searing into my heart. His stance of marrying no one but me has moved me deeply. Madame Sheng, rebutted by my words, was choked with rage. Her face turned pale and she could only glare at me in fury. In those eyes, I saw nothing but loathing and resentment. We were born of the same mother, yet my elder sister, Isabella, was betrothed to royalty, while I was merely engaged to the son of a third-rank official. The bias was clear, distinct, and glaringly obvious. After I left her speechless and she stormed off in anger, Isabella came to find me. Today she was dressed elegantly, yet she resembled a common gardenia on my windowsill, its scent fleeting in the wind and easily dispersed. The streets were full of such flowers. She could not compare to the noble and luxurious beauty of a peony basking in the morning sun. Evelyn, you really should not argue with mother. If this gets out, it will damage your reputation. Furthermore, entering the palace to serve His Majesty is a blessing that countless women pray for yet cannot obtain. If this blessing is so great, do you want it for yourself, sister? I replied coldly. She was set to marry a prince in the prime of his youth with a boundless future, while I was being forced to enter the palace to serve an emperor nearly 30 years my senior. It was both cruel and shameless. Isabella, enraged by my words, stormed away. Before I could even finish a cup of tea, my eldest brother, William Sheng, arrived. I assumed he would be as shameless as the others, coming to advise and coerce me. Unexpectedly, he remained silent for a long while before uttering a single sentence. Evelyn, the imperial decree has been issued, you cannot escape it. How will you know the outcome if you do not try? I whispered softly, having cast aside everything with no path for retreat. In the Sheng family I was utterly alone. However, I wanted to attempt to find my own destiny, so I sent a letter to Theodore, arranging to meet at the 10-mile pavilion outside the city. I knew that a poor couple faces 100 hardships, and I understood that life is difficult for the poor but easy for the wealthy. Therefore, I brought along a large amount of banknotes and jewelry. Accompanying me was my wet nurse and her family. However, I did not just wait for Theodore, I was also met by my eldest brother and the guards of the Prime Minister's estate. I laughed involuntarily. My last shred of hope was completely shattered. Second miss, I have come to return the betrothal token. A jade pendant was presented before me. I had personally selected the material for this jade pendant, sketched the design myself, and found the best craftsman to create it. Previously, whenever he met me, Theodore always carried it with him. My heart suddenly seized in pain. I numbly accepted it, removed the matching pendant from my own neck, threw it back to him, and then turned around, using all my strength to smash the jade piece I held. The yellow springs separate us, life rises and falls. The wind and moon have no destiny, love is no longer entangled, let us part ways forever. From this day forward, you and I shall walk separate paths, severing all ties of affection. Knowing I had no escape, I did not turn back to look at Theodore's pale face, but obediently boarded the carriage to return to the Prime Minister's estate. However, the carriage stopped in front of the Celestial Tower. "There is a noble person who wishes to meet you." I frowned in confusion. Who could be so important that William would humble himself to such an extent? I stepped out of the carriage, preparing to enter the Celestial Tower. William spoke again. "Second sister, we are flesh and blood. We share the glory, and we share the shame. When you go up there to meet this noble person, remember to speak carefully. You must think everything through thoroughly." My foot, which had just lifted to step forward, slowly retracted. I tilted my head to look at him. Since I could remember, this was the first time he had ever called me second sister. In that instant, I deduced who was waiting upstairs. With a faint, cold smile, I walked up the stairs. Daisy attempted to follow me, but the guards extended their arms to block her path. "Miss," Daisy cried out in panic, her eyes filled with anxiety as tears streamed down her face. "Do not worry, I will be fine. Just wait here for me." Even if not for myself, I had to think of my wet nurse's family. When it was necessary to endure humiliation, I would endure, but they had best pray that I do not gain favor. Otherwise, the first person to lose all hope and eligibility for the throne will be Prince Nicholas. I would make them realize that all their scheming was nothing but a futile effort. As soon as I reached the upper floor, someone was there to lead the way. "Second miss, this way please." The man had a pale, beardless face and a shrill voice. Clearly, he was a eunuch. At the end of the hall, the door to a private room was left slightly ajar. The guiding eunuch became even more respectful. "Second miss, please enter." I hesitated for a moment, then stepped into the private room and bowed to the man standing by the window. "This subject greets your majesty." I had entered the palace a few times before and had greeted the emperor, but on those occasions I had always kept my head bowed low, never daring to look directly at his dragon countenance. Today, I did not hide but raised my eyes to look at him. He had a tall, solid physique, completely unlike the bloated, cumbersome appearance one might expect of a man past 40. Seeming to sense my gaze, he tilted his head slightly to look back. He possessed the brow of a hero and eyes like stars, exuding a majestic aura. His gaze was sharp as a knife, carrying the imposing air of a monarch who stands above the masses. A single glance seemed to pierce through all my camouflage. I was terrified and trembled involuntarily, my face flushing red as I hurriedly bowed my head. All the vague and absurd thoughts in my mind vanished in an instant. A soft snort of amusement echoed, causing me to flush with confusion, unsure of how to react. I bit my lip to stifle a gasp, digging my fingernails deep into my palms until it hurt. Only in this way could I barely manage to keep myself from collapsing and losing my dignity. "What are you afraid of?" His voice carried a hint of curiosity mixed with a vague sense of concern. "Your Majesty is imposing and majestic. This subject should not have been so bold as to gaze upon your holy countenance. I beg your Majesty for forgiveness." I knelt down, bowing my head low and exposing my slender, snow-white neck. From his vantage point, he could clearly see the delicate curve of my shoulders. At that moment I was unaware that my neck was bleeding. The blood had stained my collarbone and the collar of my dress. I only sensed a pair of exquisite boots approaching. Each step seemed to weigh heavily on my heart, leaving me in a state of turmoil. A large hand was extended before me. I looked up, my eyes red and filled with panic, surprise, and hesitation. I knew that if I placed my hand in his, there would be no turning back. But did I have any other choice? If I did not enter the palace, the Sheng family would only offer me two paths: become a nun or die of a sudden illness. There was no third option. I did not even realize my tears were falling until a rough thumb wiped away a drop from the corner of my eye. "Why are you crying? Are you frightened?" The emperor's voice held a note of confusion, and then he asked, "Do you not wish to enter the palace?" I wanted to say yes, but in that moment, amidst my fear and confusion, I managed to retain enough clarity to analyze the consequences. Rejecting the emperor meant death. Even if the emperor was merciful and did not punish me, if I returned to the prime minister's estate, I would never see the light of another day. Since death was inevitable either way, I had to fight for myself while I still could. This subject does not wish to be a concubine. Even if I were to become the most favored consort, basking in gummet glory, I still would not want it. "You wish to be the empress." I looked up at the emperor. His expression remained unchanged, his eyes like a still pool, gazing down with majestic authority. I was weak and helpless, kneeling on the ground, craning my neck until it ached, yet I stubbornly forced out a single word: "Yes." The position of empress had been vacant for 6 years. Countless concubines, noble daughters, and officials looked upon it with greedy eyes. In terms of reputation, appearance, and family background, I was worthy. It only depended on whether the emperor wished to grant it or not. You certainly dare to make demands. The emperor chuckled softly, once again extending his hand toward me. Your Majesty agrees. I could not help but be astonished. If not, do you intend to kneel here and cry forever? The emperor said, extending his hand a little further. He gave a soft grunt of affirmation, but I heard it very clearly. Gritting my teeth, I placed my hand in his. Immediately, his hand tightened, pulling me up sharply and pulling me into his embrace. The impact against his solid chest made my tears flow from the pain. Although his embrace was as hot as fire, I felt a chill that penetrated to my very bones. If you have any other requests, speak to them now. The emperor lowered his head and whispered in my ear. Although his voice was gentle, I could detect the desire within it. I gritted my teeth, gripping his lapel as if my life depended on it. This subject wishes to enter the palace through the solar gate. Since the founding of the nation, no empress had ever entered the palace through the solar gate. Entering through the solar gate not only symbolized the position of empress, but also demonstrated the emperor's ultimate favor. Once I gave birth to a prince, he would be the legitimate son of the central palace. Even at a young age, he could contend for the position of crown prince. I did not need love, having power was enough. He did not push me away, nor did he scold me. He simply held me for a moment longer, then burst into laughter. Your father did not dare to demand the position of empress for you, let alone mention the solar gate. Yet you dare to speak of it. I could hear the amusement in his voice. I pushed him away slightly and looked him straight in the eye. So, will your Majesty grant it? If I do not, what do you intend to do? Cry? No, that was not who Evelyn was. I pushed the emperor away and took 2 steps back. I wanted to take a handkerchief to wipe my tears, but I realized my palms were bloody and my nails were broken. I remained silent for a moment, then walked to the window and looked down at the anxious face of William, who was gazing up at me. My voice was filled with grievance. From childhood until now, my parents and brothers have only favored my elder sister and younger siblings, while I was forever forgotten. I always wondered if there would ever be someone who could indulge me and cherish me. My eyes flashed with a cold, calculating light. But when I turned back to look at the emperor, my expression once again displayed a mix of fragility and stubbornness. Your Majesty, could that person be you? I frowned slightly, my voice as soft as a passing breeze, vanishing in an instant. The emperor did not answer, he simply ordered someone to bring a clean towel and medicine. He sat down on a chair, and his voice rang out coolly. Come here. I did not want to step forward. An instinctive fear rose within me, my heart filled with conflict and resistance. But I understood better than anyone that I could not refuse. My legs felt as if they were weighed down by 1,000 pounds as I took slow steps toward him, and sat down on the brocade stool. Give me your hand. The emperor's voice carried an undeniable authority. Trembling, I extended my hand. It was pale and slender, but the palm was covered in blood, marked by deep indentations from my fingernails, with blood oozing out drop by drop. The emperor held my hand and used his other hand to gently wipe it clean with the towel. His hands were rough and full of strength, yet his movements were incredibly gentle and meticulous. I blinked a few times, a feeling of bitterness rising in my heart. Aside from my devoted maids, no one had ever treated me with such gentleness, as if I were a rare and precious treasure. He wiped away the blood, applied the medicine, and bandaged my hand carefully. Throughout the entire process, I was still too stunned to react. When his hand touched my neck, intending to pull back my collar to inspect the wound, I was so terrified that I fell to the floor. He frowned slightly, his imposing aura overwhelming me. Shame filled my heart, and I could not stop my tears from falling. I choked out the words, Your Majesty, this is not appropriate. I was truly afraid that he would force himself on me. With no wedding and no affection, only possession and dominance, I would be nothing more than dirt beneath his feet. If I had to endure such humiliation, I would rather dash my head against the wall and die. The emperor sighed softly. You are injured on your neck. I only wished to apply medicine for you, yet you have misunderstood me. Very well. He extended his hand once more. His hand still carried the faint scent of medicine mixed with the metallic tang of blood. I hesitated, but eventually placed my hand in his. This time, he was much gentler. He intended to support my waist but withdrew his hand, waiting for me to stand steady before stepping aside. I took a few steps back, bowing my head in silence. not daring to utter a word. I wanted to leave but lacked the courage to ask. He removed a jade pendant and offered it to me. Take it. I glanced at the jade and hurriedly refused. I dare not accept. You dare to demand the position of Empress. You even wish to enter the palace through the solar gate. And yet, you do not dare to accept a simple jade pendant. Hearing this, I gritted my teeth and accepted it without further hesitation. I thank your majesty. He waved a hand, and I immediately curtsied and withdrew. I did not quite scramble away for my life, but I certainly left in a hurry. By the time I reached the bottom of the stairs, my legs were so weak I could barely stand. Daisy immediately rushed forward to support me. I am fine. Let us go home. Once inside the carriage, William started to say something, but I simply held up the jade pendant the Emperor had bestowed upon me. As expected, he immediately fell silent. I gave a cold, soft snort. He was nothing but a hypocrite who bullied the weak. Upon returning to the estate, my father was already waiting in the main hall, his face dark with rage. How could I have such a rude, reckless daughter who brings shame to our family like you? He shouted, raising his hand to slap me. I immediately raised the Emperor's jade pendant. He recognized it instantly. His hand, raised high, suddenly froze in midair, and he dared not bring it down. His eyes revealed his terror. It was truly laughable. I burst into laughter. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I staggered back to my small courtyard, laughing and crying at the same time. What was I still hoping for? What in the end was I expecting? I asked myself these questions, feeling like a drowning person desperately trying to grasp at straws. The only thing I held tightly in my hand was this piece of jade, representing power. When Daisy helped me bathe, she mentioned that my neck was injured. I replied indifferently that I felt no pain and did not care. Looking at my clumsily bandaged hand and the dragon, carved jade pendant I held, I asked Daisy, "Miss, is this jade beautiful?" "It is very beautiful. This servant has never seen such a beautiful piece of jade." Not only had Daisy never seen one, but neither had I. However, Isabella had seen them. In fact, she possessed several such items. Daisy knelt before me, placing her hand on the jade. "Miss, wherever you go, I will follow. In life or death, I will never leave you. Under this sky, is there any land that does not belong to the king? Where else could we possibly go?" A pigeon flew down and landed on the windowsill. A friend I had come to know through letters had sent me another message. Looking at the contents, I saw he had written a few short poems, inspired by random thoughts. They were full of phrases about the rising sun, radiant light, and a bright future. I could not help but feel a sense of irony. Did I even have a future? Taking up my pen, I wrote a few short, final lines. "I am about to enter the palace. Do not contact me again. We were merely like duckweed meeting on the water. From this point on, we are separated, with no further ties to one another in this world." I was confined to my room again. I was oblivious to the changing winds and rains outside. Isabella came several times to boast, telling stories of how she and Prince Nicholas went sightseeing and recited poetry. "It seems the royal palace no longer requires you to enter, does it? But you have already broken your engagement with the C family's son. What will you do now? Will any family be willing to accept you as a daughter-in-law?" I looked up at her. "If not, perhaps I should suffer a little and marry into Prince Nicholas's manor in your place. You truly have no shame." Isabella angrily flicked her sleeve and stormed off. Finally, there was peace. I breathed a sigh of relief. That day, the sky was clear and sunny. Prime Minister Sheng walked briskly into my small courtyard. He looked at me with scrutiny, even a hint of suspicion and wariness. I sat on my chair without moving, allowing him to observe me. "Did you tell the Emperor that you wished to enter the palace through the solar gate and become Empress?" "That is correct." He slammed his hand on the table and shouted in rage. "You are truly audacious." I remained silent, wondering to myself what the Emperor would do. Would it be as I wished, or would he merely send a small sedan chair to carry me into the palace? I always felt it would be the former. When the imperial decree arrived, I became even more certain. Kneeling on the ground, I listened to the herald read each flowery sentence. For a moment, my mind became hazy. With the golden book and the golden seal, I establish her as Empress. Let her accept this decree and serve as an example for the harem, bringing eternal blessings. I took a deep breath. This subject accepts the decree. Taking the decree, I was certain that my position as Empress was unchangeable. Seeing Isabella's wide eyes, filled with disbelief and jealousy, I smiled back at her. If she wanted to be Empress, she would have to survive countless rounds of infighting and struggle. From now on, whenever she met me, she'd have to kneel on the ground and address me as Her Majesty, the Empress. Madame Sheng stood beside me, her eyes filled with displeasure and gloom. I only needed to live well and ensure Prince Nicholas lost his eligibility for the throne. That would be the greatest revenge against her bias. Father was conversing with the herald. I looked up at the dazzling sun above and curled my lips into a cold smile. 10,000 imperial guards clearing the way, a 16-bearer phoenix carriage carrying me through the solar gate into the palace. It was truly worthy of a hearty laugh. A petty person having their moment of triumph is nothing more than this, I thought. As the wedding day approached, the emperor bestowed countless treasures. Rare jades, eastern pearls worth 1,000 gold, and deep-sea coral were all casually cast aside in a corner by me. Looking at the stand holding the phoenix robe and the crimson phoenix crown, I reached out to touch them. At that moment, I craved power more than ever before. When Prime Minister Sheng arrived, his face was gloomy. I stood before the phoenix robe and asked with a smile, "Father, do you find this phoenix robe beautiful? If you intend to advise me to speak well of Prince Nicholas after entering the palace, there is no need to open your mouth. I will not do it. If you wish to tell me to serve His Majesty well, that is even less necessary. I am the Empress of the Central Palace, and the Emperor is my husband. Naturally, I will prioritize him above all else." I blocked every word he intended to say, giving him no chance to speak. He looked at me deeply for a long while. "You are on your own." Madame Sheng was even more excessive. She said that serving a king with beauty alone cannot last long. Father says I am intelligent, yet mother criticizes me for having only beauty. Speaking of which, aren't you contradicting yourself, mother? This Isabella whom you favor so much is not only foolish but also lacks beauty. Wouldn't her fate be even more miserable? Just a few sentences stabbed right into her black heart. Seeing her face so angry she could not utter a word gave me immense satisfaction. On the day I entered the palace, I brought only Daisy. I returned the deeds of servitude to all the others who had served me, including my wet nurse's family, gave them silver, and let them find their own way. Sitting in the vast phoenix carriage, the sound of palace music rang in my ears. Although the phoenix crown was heavy, I sat with my back straight, unwavering. The sound of whips cracking the air echoed outside. The civil and military officials knelt in unison. "We subjects bow to Her Majesty the Empress. Long live Her Majesty." Beneath the dark red veil, I could not see the bustling scene, but my blood seemed to be boiling. Until a large hand reached into the phoenix carriage, and a low voice filled with laughter rang in my ear. "Empress, come here to me." I trembled slightly as if an electric current had passed through me. My hand, with nails painted bright red, reached out. The Emperor took it and helped me step out of the phoenix carriage. I heard sharp intakes of breath. Indeed, on the day of bowing to heaven and earth, the Empress could handle the ritual alone. The Emperor did not need to appear. But today, he came. Entering from the solar gate was already a great favor, and today, both dignity and affection were ample. He stroked my hand gently. "Are you afraid without the Emperor here?" "Truly, I am not afraid," he chuckled softly. "The phoenix crown is very heavy, is it not?" I wanted to say it was heavy, but I could not say such words. I replied skillfully. "The one who wears the crown must bear its weight." Sitting on the phoenix bed in the endless palace, the red veil embroidered with harmonious dragons and phoenixes was gently lifted by a jade scepter. I looked up at him. He looked back at me, his eyes smiling. "Are you happy?" "Yes. Fame and profit are both in my hands, how could I not be happy?" On the night of flowery candles, the Emperor's gentleness and passion left me completely unprepared and unable to resist. When I was exhausted to the extreme, he carried me to the warm bath, then carried me back to bed. Although I was drained lying in his arms, my mind was strangely alert. Weak and gentle, I leaned against him and whispered, "Your Majesty, could you call this concubine Evie?" His arm around me paused slightly. His warm, deep voice resonated above my head. "Evie." I did not know if the Emperor treated all concubines in the harem so gently. His eyes and gestures were filled with deep affection and lingering attachment. But in my heart, everything was flat, without a single ripple. What I wanted was distinctiveness. The harem was full of concubines, and the title of Empress had been held by others before. Only being special could last a long time. I looked up at him, and he looked down at me. "Your Majesty, thank you," I said softly. "Go to sleep." He stroked my hair, his hand gently patting my back. My heart trembled slightly. No one had ever treated me like this before, as if I were the most precious treasure in the palm of his hand. I was truly tired. I fell asleep without realizing it. When I woke up, the sky was already bright. The Emperor was no longer by my side. Outside, the soft voice of a eunuch drifted in. "Your Majesty, the mistresses of the various palaces have arrived. Let them wait." The emperor's voice was lazy, carrying a tone of matter, of factness. I pondered for a moment, then closed my eyes again. Then I heard the eunuch's voice again. "Your Majesty, the princes and princesses have also arrived." I knew I should get up, but as soon as I moved, my whole body ached as if I had been run over by a carriage. Her Majesty is awake. Several palace maids gently lifted the curtains and carefully helped me up. Even with support, walking felt difficult. I looked toward the outer room with some dissatisfaction and met the emperor's gaze. I remained calm and did not avoid it, but thinking of the events of last night, my face instantly flushed red, and I quickly turned away. Before looking away, I did not forget to glare at him. The emperor coughed lightly. I bowed my head and smiled gently, acting properly. As the empress, today I had to accept the greetings of the concubines, princes, princesses, and noble ladies. Although it did not need to be as grand as the wedding day, it could not be sloppy. On a red silk tray lay several 9-tailed phoenix hairpins. "Your Majesty, please choose one to wear today." I ran my hand over the hairpins, then turned to look at the emperor. "Your Majesty." He was still holding a book. "These hairpins are all very beautiful. This concubine does not know which one to choose. Could you choose for me?" I heard the maids take a deep breath. The emperor paused for a moment, then put down the book and walked toward me. He stood beside me, the scent of ambergris wafting from him. He glanced at the tray of hairpins, seemingly dissatisfied. "Walter, go fetch the phoenix hairpin from my private treasury." "Yes." I looked up at him, my eyes full of confusion. "These are for you to wear for fun later. My phoenix hairpin is quite different from these. Have breakfast first." I did not understand where the difference lay, but I still extended my hand for him to support me. The emperor held my hand, his other hand supporting my waist, half leading, half carrying me as we walked. I thought of his hand around my waist last night, tightening its grip. My face burned like fire, and my ears turned red. My eyes darted everywhere, daring not to look at him. The table was filled with all kinds of pastries, savory dishes, porridges, and soups, numbering 40 or 50 items. "Has your Majesty had breakfast?" I looked up, my eyes glistening as I looked straight at him. I had used this look on Daisy before. She said it made people melt. Seeing the flash of warmth in the emperor's eyes, I knew the gaze I had practiced for so long was effective. "I will have a little more with you." I had intended to pick some dishes for him to show my virtuousness, but he scooped a spoonful of ginseng soup and brought it to my lips. His voice was low. "Last night I was a rough and caused Evie pain. Let this bowl of soup be my apology. Will you forgive me?" The standing maids inhaled sharply. My face blushing, I replied softly, "Then in the future your Majesty must remember to be a little gentler." After speaking, I hurriedly drank the soup to hide my embarrassment and the small joy in my heart. In this palace, regardless of your status, being favored or not created a difference like heaven and earth. I had chosen this path, so naturally, I had to be favored. Ideally, exclusively favored. I also had to give birth to a legitimate son soon. That was the most important thing. The emperor personally fed me a few spoonfuls of soup. I stole a glance at him, seeing his eyes filled with laughter and indulgence. Indulgence. Impossible. Or perhaps my appearance resembled someone the emperor once sought but could not obtain, so he took me as a substitute. If so, everything was easily understood. When eunuch Walter brought the phoenix hairpin, I understood the difference. Carved on the hairpin were 9 small dragons, incredibly exquisite. The emperor personally placed the hairpin in my hair. "You are still young. This phoenix hairpin can add a bit of majesty. Let us go, I will accompany you there." He took my hand, gently stroking my palm. He admired my pale hand, which bore no trace of the injury. After stroking it a few times, he tightened his grip. I could only sneer in my heart. Amen. The emperor has arrived. Her Majesty the Empress has arrived. The announcement echoed through the great hall. A crowd of people knelt down, chanting melodiously, "Long live the Emperor, long live Her Majesty." I was led by the hand of the Emperor to sit in the center seat. "Rise." The Emperor's voice was steady and calm, completely different from the gentleness when he conversed with me earlier. He helped me sit down under the gaze of so many people, and even adjusted the phoenix hairpin on my hair. "It is crooked." His voice was still very gentle, but this action was like placing me on a fire for all the concubines in the harem to know that I was favored. Or perhaps he wanted to turn me into a target. My eyes swept across the room, seeing several concubines glaring at me with red eyes, looking as if they wanted to tear me apart. "Pay your respects." The emperor waved his hand nonchalantly, sitting up straight with a lofty demeanor. I also hurriedly maintained the solemn dignity of the Empress. Noble consort Fiona paid her respects. Noble consort Fiona did not look old, but her eyes were extremely sharp. Previously, I always had to bow to her, but today the tables had turned. I entered from the solar gate, while the noble consort had climbed up step by step from the selection. The difference in nobility between her and me was like heaven and earth. This concubine greets Her Majesty the Empress. Grant the rewards. As expected, no one in the harem is simple. Although she wanted to eat me alive in her heart, with eyes like knives, on the surface she quickly hid it. Her words were full of flowery praise for my youth and beauty, saying the emperor and I were a match made in heaven, wishing us 100 years of harmony and the early birth of a precious son. She received the reward and bowed in gratitude. Looking at those rewards, I tilted my head to look at the emperor, because what he bestowed was completely different from what I had prepared. He said nothing, only gently patted my hand. I did not know if it was to comfort me or to imply that my rewards were unworthy. Regardless, the gazes of the concubines became even colder, jealousy and resentment almost spilled over. After the concubines finished their obeisance, it was the turn of the princes and princesses. The princes were all older than me, yet they still had to kneel and call me mother. Looking at the people who were previously high above me, I suddenly understood why everyone sought fame and profit, craving that supreme position. When it was the prince's turn, a look of displeasure and humiliation flashed across his face. Perhaps he never thought that I would become the empress, a person who could scold and discipline him. But striking at a fallen dog, the time was not yet ripe. Then came the noble ladies of the high officials. I did not recognize them all, but those who had once bullied, badmouthed, or looked down on me, now had to prostrate themselves on the ground. They did not even have the right to look me in the eye. The wind changes direction. The scene of 30 years east of the river, 30 years west, I was now experiencing fully. Your Majesty. May this concubine keep my mother, elder sister, and sister-in-law to chat for a while. Granted. Thank you, Your Majesty. I smiled, my voice tinged with sweetness, my eyes bright and full of vitality. That was the liveliness this harem lacked. Unlike those who appeared resigned to fate on the outside but were sinister and venomous like vipers on the inside, I had not yet been tainted. I could maintain a fresh, innocent, and frank appearance, presenting a side the emperor had never seen, but certainly one he liked. At the Endless Palace, looking at Madame Sheng, Isabella, and my sister-in-law kneeling on the ground, I did not tell them to rise. My voice was indifferent. Mother, am I truly your biological daughter? I saw her shoulders tremble violently. Isabella and my sister-in-law looked up in panic, their eyes full of shock, then quickly lowered their heads. I laughed out loud. So that is how it is. No wonder the bias was so reasonable. No wonder no matter how hard I tried, I could not exchange it for a bit of love. The last illusions in my heart vanished like smoke. Familial affection cannot be forced. I should learn to let go. You may leave. Do not meet again in the future. Madame Sheng looked up, her eyes full of hatred, but then quickly avoided my gaze. If it were before, she would certainly have shouted at me, but now she could only suffer in silence. Humans truly only like to bully the weak. But I understood she did not fear me, but rather the chair I sat on and the power behind me. I stood up and left, hearing their unwilling and pained voices. We respectfully bid farewell to Her Majesty the Empress. When the Emperor arrived, I was sitting by the window in a daze. He approached, and I hurriedly stood up to curtsy, but he placed his hand on my shoulder to stop me. His finger gently wiped the tears from my cheek. Crying again? Do you miss home? I shook my head, wrapped my arms around his waist, and pressed my face against his chest. My voice choked with sobs. Your Majesty, perhaps this concubine is the most pitiful empress in the world. Since childhood, I always tried to please mother and curry favor with my siblings, but no matter what I did, they pretended not to see. My eldest sister often led people to bully and mock me, locking me in a dark room, and even putting snakes and centipedes in my room. I used to think that perhaps I had not done well enough. But today I learned that it turns out I am not mother's biological daughter. Therefore, no matter what I do, I will never be loved by her. My tears flowed, soaking the emperor's dragon robe. If the emperor had the heart, he could easily investigate these matters more clearly than I could. In this endless palace, apart from Daisy, no one was my person. Every word and action of mine could be spread by others, perhaps even becoming evidence to harm me in the future. Instead of letting that seed of disaster exist, I might as well expose the truth myself. The most powerful man in the world was right in front of me. If he cared, he would investigate on his own, and he would also ask my father whose daughter I truly was. If he did not care, then no one could use my background to hurt me. The emperor offered no words of comfort, only silently stroked my head. Your Majesty. I have made you laugh at me. In the room, I looked at myself in the bronze mirror, holding a towel to wipe my eyes red and swollen. If before I had a fragile appearance that made people pity me, now I added a few parts of haggardness, evoking even more compassion. When the emperor saw me, he was momentarily surprised and asked, "Why is it swollen like this?" He immediately ordered someone to bring ice. Your Majesty, I am fine. Crying just a little made my eyes swell up. Not only did I catch the emperor's attention, but I also let the servants in the endless palace know that the empress was greatly favored. The noble consort and the 4 consorts, if they wanted to preserve their power, had to consider whether to hand authority over to the endless palace. Of course, if they did not hand it over, I would not demand it. But if they offered, I would accept without hesitation, for power inherently belonged to me. Everyone says that newlyweds certainly cannot lack nights of intimacy. The emperor came very often, making me somewhat unable to bear it. Having decided to use power to seek favor, naturally I did not push him away. But I also had to know how to protect myself. Therefore, I invited a female physician, shyly asking her to find a suitable medicine for a woman to use. The female physician was intelligent and quickly understood my meaning. Within an hour, she brought a small porcelain bottle. I did not expect to use this to test the emperor. After a night of passion, when he held me in the warm bath, I handed the porcelain bottle to him. This concubine asked the female physician to bring this. Could you help me apply it? I stammered, my face red. He looked at me for a moment, his eyes holding a hint of ambiguous laughter. What is this thing? You do not know clearly what it is, yet you dare to use it on your body casually. Saying this, he tossed the porcelain bottle aside. I had gradually come to understand the emperor's temperament through our days of contact. Hugging his neck, I shyly leaned close to his ear and whispered a few soft sentences. He froze for a moment, then sighed. It is my fault. This was the second time he admitted his haste in the bedchamber. Your Majesty, may I ask you for something? What is it? This concubine wishes to go to the state temple to burn incense and pray for blessings. I waited for his answer. Whether he agreed or not, wait a few more days when I am on break. I will go with you. I was stunned, then hurriedly kissed his cheek, smiling radiantly. Your Majesty is truly good. I was no longer the Evelyn of the past, the little girl trapped in her boudoir whom anyone could bully. Before falling asleep, I could affirm that the emperor was not only fascinated by me but also had no way to leave me. The next morning, when the concubines came to pay respects, I yawned and realized one person was missing, Lady Lily. Upon asking, I learned that Lady Lily had been demoted to noble lady and confined for 3 years. I asked the palace servants. They said Lady Lily's family was wealthy and had previously donated 10,000 taels of silver to the court. I sent 2 people to the imperial hospital to check if that female physician was still there. The young eunuch returned and shook his head. I immediately understood that there was a problem with the porcelain bottle. I just did not know if Lady Lily was the mastermind or merely a scapegoat. Before lunch, Eunuch Walter came to convey a message saying the emperor would come to the Endless Palace to dine. I raised my eyebrows slightly and ordered someone to tell the imperial kitchen to prepare a few more dishes. Although I had favorite dishes, the emperor had never shown a preference for any particular food. He would stop after 2 bites, exhibiting surprising restraint. When the emperor arrived, his dragon robe was soaked with sweat. I quickly ordered water for him to bathe and change clothes. When I intended to help him myself, he said, "Your body is not well. Just sit there and rest. Let the servants handle it." I glanced at him with dissatisfaction. Wasn't he the one who made me so tired? Now he pretended to be a good person. But I did not refute him, just sitting aside and looking at him calmly. The emperor's body was firm, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, perfect enough to make one unable to look away. "Have you seen enough?" A teasing laugh rang out. My face immediately turned red. "It is not beautiful at all." I stood up and walked further away, avoiding his teasing gaze, leaving behind the sound of his amused laughter tinged with triumph. I stomped my foot in anger. After lunch the emperor placed a string of transparent beads on my wrist. Jadeite. It is rare to have such a beautiful kind. Wear it for fun. I was about to thank him when he handed me another porcelain bottle, leaned close to my ear, and whispered, "Tonight, let me apply it for you." I glared at him. This tyrant. I felt I had dug a pit for myself and fallen into it. That evening, the feeling became reality. I finally understood the meaning of shooting oneself in the foot. Your Majesty, please spare me. Because of this matter, I nearly vomited blood. From then on, every action to be extremely cautious. He surprised me again. The seal managing the harem was placed before me. This is yours. As the Empress of the Central Palace, this should have belonged to you long ago. It is just that I told them to finish organizing all the ledgers by the end of the month. He rubbed my head. I have instructed Eunuch Walter to follow you to handle matters. Those who do not listen, beat them or punish them as you see fit. I tried to suppress the joy on my face and revealed a bit of worry. What if I cannot suppress them? Those who deliberately cause trouble are likely to have masters behind them. With me as your support, are you still afraid of a bunch of servants? I immediately shook my head. With the Emperor as backup, even if I were unreasonable, no one would dare say anything. Eunuch Walter was indeed a capable eunuch. He handled everything in an orderly manner and had an excellent memory. I once praised him in front of the Emperor, but the Emperor's face immediately darkened. Is it that I am not good? I blinked and hurriedly coaxed him. Your Majesty is the best, no one is better. Over the past few days, I had learned how to please the most powerful man in the world. Hugging him, saying gentle words, kissing him, acting spoiled, the little bit of sour jealousy in his heart vanished. He snorted coldly and pinched my cheek lightly, letting the matter pass. All power in the harem officially lay in my hands. On the day we left the palace, I brought a scented sachet I had embroidered days ago, intending to put the peace talisman inside after obtaining it at the state temple and gift it to the Emperor. He had the entire world in his hands and possessed everything, lacking only a bit of sincere affection. At the Great Hall of the Buddha, I knelt for 2 hours to ask for 2 peace talismans, kneeling until my knees ached unbearably. Dragging my quiet steps to find him, I saw him talking to the abbot. The abbot glanced at me, then turned to the Emperor and said, "The saint will certainly have his wish fulfilled." It was unclear what he was talking about. I obediently sat next to the Emperor. He took my hand. "Just for a peace talisman, you had to kneel for so long. Sincerity makes it effective." I mumbled. He said nothing more, but I knew he was very pleased. The abbot preached profound and lofty scriptures. I listened but understood nothing and felt sleepy. Unsurprisingly, I leaned on the Emperor's shoulder and fell asleep, even snoring softly in his arms. When I woke up, I sat up with a start. "Where am I?" "Your Majesty, we are still in the meditation room of the state temple. The Emperor ordered you to rest and told this servant to massage your legs," Daisy said. Was the Emperor angry? Daisy shook her head. I breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he was not angry. I also did not expect to fall asleep. Knowing we would stay at the state temple for a few days, I was extremely happy because the vegetarian food here was delicious. When my grandmother was alive, I once came here with her. After she passed away, I never had the chance to return. This time, I wanted to offer an eternal lamp for her, to tell her that I was living well. Perhaps because I was in a good mood after leaving the palace, I ate much more deliciously than usual. In the palace, I dared not eat my fill at every meal, let alone eat a lot. No emperor likes a chubby concubine. Maintaining favor was not an easy task. Guessing the emperor's mind and maintaining one's appearance all took mental effort. He said nothing more, just glanced at me once and stopped. After lunch, I asked to find the abbot to chant scriptures and pray for blessings. The peace talisman I obtained was placed on the altar, and I read the scriptures very attentively. The emperor once came to look at me. I knew, but I pretended not to know. He stood outside for a while and then left. While chanting, I pondered how to cultivate useful people. During our time at the state temple, the emperor did not sleep with me, except for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The rest of the time I prayed, and I was unclear what he was busy with. Upon returning to the palace, I carefully tied the handmade scented sachet to his belt. This concubine knelt for days until my knees were swollen to get this peace talisman inside this sachet. "Your Majesty must not throw it away." He pinched my nose lightly, lowered his head, and whispered 2 sentences in my ear. My eyes widened in shock as I looked at him. What kind of nonsense is this? I hurriedly covered his mouth with my hand. He just laughed and carried me onto the carriage. On the way back to the capital, the emperor asked, "Do you want to visit your home?" My body stiffened, then I shook my head slightly. "Can this concubine go to someone else's house?" I sighed softly and recounted. In the past, when grandmother was alive, although she was strict, she treated me not badly. There was a cousin uncle who was very kind. Every time he came, he brought some food for me. Those things might not be valuable to others, but to me, they were things I prayed for but could not get. I always looked forward to Uncle's arrival. I recounted the days in the Prime Minister's estate. Although on the surface it was glorious and wealthy, in reality, the things there did not belong to me. The items in the room were exquisite but were all fake. If not for my talent in writing and painting, and my wet nurse secretly selling them outside, or even writing a few popular folk stories, I would not have been able to save any silver. Could your Majesty grant a little grace to my cousin's uncle? I lowered my voice, leaning my head against him. My voice was both obedient and tinged with a little sadness. The Emperor nodded slightly. Granted. My cousin's uncle, although a son of a concubine, was very talented. He had passed the examinations and was now a 6th-rank official. When the Emperor and I visited, the whole family was terrified. My cousin's aunt and 2 little cousins were shaking with fear. I only drank a cup of tea, bestowed some gifts, and left. When seeing us off at the door, my cousin's aunt respectfully said goodbye. With subjects respectfully bid farewell to the Emperor and Her Majesty the Empress. Although they were afraid in their hearts, their behavior was very proper. I thought that after returning to the palace, I would summon my cousin's aunt to the palace for a chat and support them a little. The Emperor took me to a restaurant. Before my eyes were all delicious dishes, but I did not find them appetizing. I only lightly drank a small bowl of sour soup. You do not want to eat. I intended to force myself to eat more, but the taste was like chewing wax. Instead, I requested another bowl of soup. The Emperor looked at me, his eyes smiling yet not smiling. When we returned to the palace, I was surprised to see that a bowl of sour soup appeared at dinner. I have summoned the chef to the palace. This matter quickly spread throughout the harem, driving the concubines crazy with jealousy. On the 3rd day, I discovered that my bird's nest had been tampered with. I called someone from the Imperial Hospital to check, discovered extremely cold medicinal ingredients in it. I requested my pulse be taken again. 3 months had passed since I entered the palace as Empress. Every night the Emperor slept at the Endless Palace. My monthly cycle had not come, and my taste had changed significantly. After taking my pulse, the imperial physician joyfully said, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Your Majesty is expecting." Hearing this, I was overjoyed. I rewarded him, then ordered someone to invite the Emperor, but gave strict instructions not to reveal the reason. The Emperor arrived faster than I imagined. His steps were hurried. Surely he already knew. I smiled and ran to hug him. Looking up with glistening eyes, he rubbed my cheek, his voice gentle. "You must be careful." I smiled and nodded, proactively taking his hand and walking into the main hall. From this moment on, I was not only fighting for favor for myself but also for the child in my belly. In this deep harem, everyone lived relying on the Emperor's expression and favor. I pushed the bowl of bird's nest toward him, letting the imperial physician report himself. The Emperor's face darkened. He said nothing, only glancing at Eunuch Walter. Eunuch Walter immediately took the order and left. The person behind this, whoever it was, would have to pay the price. Whether they lived or died, I did not care. But if they dared to reach into my bird's nest, I certainly would not let them off. The Emperor only stayed for a short while before leaving. But immediately after, countless rewards were sent to the Endless Palace. The concubines in the harem, with their quick sources of information, came one after another to visit me with gifts. In their words, jealousy, praise, and admiration were clearly visible. I smiled, my eyes full of laughter, but my heart was cold. Although the Emperor had many children, he had no legitimate offspring, whether prince or princess. If I gave birth to this child smoothly, it would be the only one. Of course, that also depended on whether the Emperor wanted me to give birth to this child. The harem was full of dark hands, but I was not afraid of them. The only thing that made me wary was the Emperor. If the Emperor wished, he had 1,000 ways to make me suffer a disadvantage without being able to resist. At this moment, I deliberately revealed a look of fatigue. The concubines noticed and quickly excused themselves. When everyone had left, I lay on the bed to rest. Daisy approached and whispered, "Your Majesty, Little Lee just reported that several people in the peaceful palace were taken by Eunuch Walter to the Department of Punishment." I only hummed softly. Noble consort Fiona, was it? That evening, the Emperor came again. After finishing dinner and bathing, he hugged me as we sat on the chaise longue. "Tomorrow, I will send a few people to the Endless Palace. These people know both medicine and martial arts. You can use them with peace of mind. I will have a small kitchen built in the Endless Palace. Whatever you want to eat, let them cook it. If it is not available in the palace, order someone to buy it outside. If you lack anything, just find Walter. From now on, the concubines are exempted from paying respects to you. Focus on resting well. I was slightly surprised. Was this an intention to protect the child in my belly? Then should the management rights of the harem be handed over to other concubines? I asked. You are the empress. Power in the harem naturally must lie in your hands. His words dispelled half the worry in my heart, but caution was never superfluous. What if he wanted to nurture me well, and then at the time of birth play the trick of keeping the child and removing the mother? Thinking of this, I could not help but shudder. What is it? Are you cold? The emperor asked with concern. Your Majesty, this concubine is a little afraid. I choked out, 3 parts real, 7 parts fake. I had not even discovered it yet when someone put medicine in the bird's nest, if my tongue were not sensitive enough to taste the anomaly. I knew that in this palace, vicious plots appeared ceaselessly. From pregnancy to childbirth and raising a child to adulthood was like walking on a mountain of knives and a sea of fire. Just because I liked sour soup, I revealed a flaw for them to discover. I dared not underestimate their insidiousness, methods, and cruelty. Although I was intelligent, my experience and the manpower in my hands were not equal to theirs. Fighting alone in this harem would not lead to a long life. I will not let anyone hurt you. The emperor's promise did not make me completely at ease, because I was not sure if anyone included him. Since ancient times, monarchs have been heartless. The next day, noble consort Fiona knelt before the endless palace. Hearing eunuch Walter report the news, I slowly walked to the door but then stopped. Noble consort Fiona had 2 sons and 3 daughters. The eldest son, although a concubine's son, was the first prince. The 3 princesses were all married. Their husbands were all from prestigious families. Actually, she did not need to harm me. Even if the child in my belly was born smoothly, even if it was a legitimate son, it was still a long way to compete for the throne with the first prince who had already been made a prince. In such a long time, anything could happen. Walter, Your Majesty, what do you think? Should I go out? It is about to rain. Eunuch Walter pondered for a moment and replied, Your Majesty is benevolent. I understood his meaning. He was the emperor's confidant. Things the emperor did not want to say directly would be conveyed through his words. In the end, I still did not go out to meet noble consort Fiona. Daisy, go help noble consort Fiona up and see her back to her palace. Yes. Even though I did nothing. Noble consort Fiona was still grounded for half a year and fined 1 year's salary. 3 days later, a lady of bright deportment in the palace died. The outside world was told she slipped and fell into the water, but I did not believe it. A lady of bright deportment had a status that was not low. There were always at least a few attendants by her side. How could she slip and drown right before their eyes without anyone saving her? That night, I deliberately acted as if I had a nightmare, waking up with a start. Your Majesty. I sobbed, hugging my bed that did not yet show any signs. My whole body trembled. Do not be afraid, I am here. The emperor comforted me gently. I closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep, but I knew the breathing of a person in deep sleep and one not asleep was very different. He did not sleep, and neither did I. I quietly sat up, draped a cloak over myself. Miss. Daisy called softly. Daisy, this imperial palace is truly terrifying. When they say death, it means death. My eldest sister and I have been angry at each other for so many years, but I never thought I wanted her dead. Of course, that was a lie. If not for the lack of opportunity and the inability to clean up the traces, I would have eliminated Isabella long ago. Miss. Daisy burst into tears. What are you crying for? Now I have a child in my belly. As long as he is born safely and raised to adulthood, there is hope. What about the emperor? Daisy's question made me pause. Worthy of being someone who grew up with me, she understood me too well. Correct, what about the emperor? The emperor has treated me well enough, I dare not be greedy for more. Daisy, in the future, you must be careful with your words. Do not leave the endless palace if there is nothing to do. If you must go out, be sure to take 2 palace maids with you. Yes, Your Majesty. When I returned to bed, I heard the emperor's steady breathing. I knew he was not asleep. I also knew that although Daisy's and my voices were very low, he had certainly heard. When the pigeon appeared before me, I panicked briefly but quickly regained my composure. I removed the letter tied to its leg. Just a few simple lines asking if I was well in the palace. However, there was a faint scent of ambergris on the paper, identical to the scent on the emperor. A thought flashed through my mind, both absurd and terrifying. It could not be. You have corresponded with me for 6 years, how could you be the emperor? I pondered for a moment, then wrote, perhaps I have developed feelings for the emperor. My heart is in turmoil, not knowing how to face his 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. This time, I deliberately left a unique fragrance on the paper. If the emperor arrived carrying this scent, I would know. However, the emperor did not come. Instead, little Li, the eunuch temporarily replacing Walter, arrived with countless rewards entering the endless palace. In the air, that fragrance wafted faintly, very light, yet I still detected it. Your Majesty, the emperor personally selected these treasures. Do you like them? Who would not like jewelry? Yet, my heart felt heavy. If the person corresponding with me over these years was indeed the emperor, then my entry into the palace was easily explained. My outrageous demands at the Celestial Tower were also not difficult to understand. When he agreed to the position of Empress of the Central Palace and entry through the Solar Gate, the special favor in the harem, thinking of the truth, made my heart even heavier. But I was concerned that my speculation might not be entirely accurate, so I decided to probe. I ordered someone to prepare a bowl of nourishing soup and took a sedan chair to the Hall of Mental Cultivation. Since entering the palace, I had never set foot in the front court. Compared to the harem filled with conspiracies, the front court was much more solemn and quiet. Not to mention a guard post every 3 steps, no one dared to pass through freely. My heart felt a little uneasy. I reached out to stroke my belly and sighed softly. I thought I might have to wait a long time or might not even meet the emperor. I did not expect to be invited in so quickly. Why have you come? This concubine asked Daisy to cook some nourishing soup for your Majesty to try. I do not know how to cook now, but I wish to learn a little in the future. I did not intend to show off, for it was true I could not cook, but I was willing to learn. When I would become proficient was hard to say. There is no need to do this. You only need to nourish the pregnancy and give birth safely, that is most important. The emperor said, and he even gave me face by drinking the entire bowl of soup. I thought the harem should not interfere in politics, and this was the Hall of Mental Cultivation. Surely officials would come to discuss matters, so I stood up to excuse myself. No need to rush. Wait a moment and I will return to the Endless Palace with you. I smiled and agreed. This treatment was not only for appearance but also a tacit announcement to the front court that the Empress was greatly favored. However, I did not expect to meet my father here. Since entering the palace, I had not wanted to see him. My heart was filled with hatred and resentment. When the emperor asked me why he refused the title of duke, I only replied, "Father is noble, your Majesty should indulge his wishes." I knew very well he did not want to rely on me for a title. He wanted to wait for Prince Nicholas to ascend the throne and for Isabella to become empress. It was truly a delusional dream. I sat beside the emperor, watching my father kneeling on the ground. This subject greets your Majesty. This subject greets Her Majesty the Empress. I saw a flash of shock and contemplation in his eyes. My lips curled up slightly. Minister Sheng, you may rise. After standing up, he hesitated, unsure whether to report or not because the harem should not interfere in court affairs. Yet I was sitting right next to the emperor. I sneered coldly in my heart. When he needed to preach morality, he never did. Now he pretended to be upright. It was truly nauseating. If it were any other official, I would have stood up and left, but today I certainly would not go. Minister Sheng, speak. There is nothing the Empress cannot hear. The emperor took my hand, realizing it was slightly cold, then frowned and tightened his grip, holding my hand within his palm. This is my world, and husband and wife are one entity. Naturally, it is also the Empress's world. My heart trembled slightly. I looked up blankly at the emperor. My father was also stunned looking at him. Minister Sheng, just because you do not love this daughter does not mean I am the same. The person you view as worthless may be a priceless treasure in the eyes of others. Her Majesty is truly terrifying. My father was extremely panicked. I was stunned for a moment, then immediately regained my composure. Looking down at the emperor's hand holding mine tightly, then glancing at my father kneeling on the ground. I did not know if the emperor reserved this indulgence for other concubines, but I reminded myself not to sink into it. The love of an emperor is like the wind. It comes quickly and goes quickly. He obtained everything too easily, while what I could give was too little. I do not know what my father said when he returned, but Prince Nicholas suddenly came to request an audience at the Endless Palace. Let him in. When we met again, he still appeared confident, exuding the nobility of a royal. The South just transported some pomelos to the capital. This son brought some for mother to try. Before he could finish his sentence, Daisy had already brought out a tray of peeled red pomelos. Prince Nicholas is too thoughtful, but clearly, I already had something better, so his gift suddenly became a joke. I saw his face darken, but he still had to bow and leave. Unable to suppress my laughter, I waved my hand to dismiss him. The next day, Prince Nicholas's biological mother, Consort Clara, came to pay her respects. Unlike the 4 virtuous consorts, Consort Clara was only granted a title because she gave birth to a prince. This concubine greets Her Majesty the Empress. Although she was 20 years older than me, she still had to bow respectfully. That was the rule. Consort Clara looked reserved, carrying a bit of awkwardness. Your Majesty, there are some words this concubine does not know if I should say or not. If you do not know if you should say them, then there is no need to speak. Her face changed slightly. Before she could open her mouth again, I used the excuse of being tired to send her away. Between her and me, regardless of whether I gave birth to a prince or princess, we could not be allies, only enemies. I absolutely would not let Prince Nicholas become emperor, nor let Isabella become empress. Eunuch Walter was indeed close to the emperor. He quickly stepped forward, politely but firmly inviting Consort Clara to leave the endless palace. For the first time, I had the idea of pulling Walter to my side. Even though he was the emperor's man and I only used him temporarily, I had never thought of recruiting him before. But this time, I wanted to try. When Walter returned, only he, Daisy, and I remained in the hall. Walter spoke of his hometown, mentioning a younger brother he had not heard from in years. You have served with all your heart. After I give birth, I will ask the emperor to grant you grace to return home and visit your relatives. He paused, then hurriedly knelt down and knocked his head on the floor. This servant thanks your Majesty for your grace. A nod and a promise were enough to form a tacit alliance. When the pigeon appeared again, I calmly removed the letter. Can you be more specific? Looking at this question, I could not help but laugh. More specific about what? Was it true feelings, a game of acting, or was the emperor probing my heart? I replied, since it is love, we do not know where it began, so we cannot speak of it clearly. From then on, the pigeon acted as a messenger flying back and forth between the front court and the harem. The frequency increased from once every few days to several times a day. As my belly grew larger, the weather also became colder. Isabella was married to Prince Nicholas in a grand ceremony, but when compared to me, who entered through the solar gate, no matter how grand it was, she was merely a follower imitating me. I did not go to congratulate them, only ordering someone to bring gifts that were neither light nor heavy as a wedding present. From the day I entered the palace, she and I could not share the same sky. There was no way to reconcile. The next day, the newlyweds entered the palace to give thanks. Watching the two of them kneel before me offering tea. Mother, please have some tea. I laughed and almost spilled the tea from the cup. The emperor reached out to take it, handed it to Walter, and then wiped the spilled tea from my hand with a towel. While doing so, he indifferently instructed the young couple. In the future, you two should rely on each other and have children soon. Correct, the emperor not only had many children, but his grandsons and granddaughters were also numerous. But that was not important. I was carrying his legitimate son. As long as I sat firmly on the empress's throne, the concubines in the palace would forever be just concubines. I gave birth in February, right in the spring when flowers were blooming and all things were growing. What I did not expect was that the child would be born on the 2nd day of the 2nd month, the day the dragon raises its head. I went into labor on the evening of the 1st. Sweat poured down and my face was distorted with pain. The emperor held my hand, gently comforting me. Do not be afraid. I am right outside waiting for you until you safely give birth to the prince. Of course I was afraid. A woman giving birth is like stepping with one foot into the gates of hell. If someone tampered with anything, the lives of both me and the child might not be saved. I gripped the emperor's hand tightly, choking back tears as I called out softly, "My Arthur." This was the first time I had called him that. Seeing his red eyes hiding tears, I knew he was trapped in the web of love I had spun. As long as he was right outside the delivery room, those who intended to harm me and my child would not dare to act. I believed that accidents like hemorrhaging, difficult birth, or life-threatening dangers would be less likely to occur. Since becoming pregnant, I had taken care of myself very carefully, eating moderately, exercising appropriately, and resting properly. Early in the morning on the 2nd day of the 2nd month, as the sun was just rising, I gave birth to the first son of Arthur and me. Looking at him holding the child, his face full of joy, he even showed him to me. Evie, look, our imperial son is truly very beautiful. I turned to look. Inside the swaddling clothes was a red, wrinkled baby with some skin that hadn't peeled off yet. I could not call him beautiful, but my heart softened in an instant. I wanted to sit up to hold my son. The Emperor placed his hand on my shoulder, his eyes clearly showing disapproval. Wait until you have fully recovered, then hold him. Hearing this, I could only withdraw my intention. My body was indeed still very weak and tired. But looking at the child I had carried for 10 months, I could not stop looking, nor could I resist reaching out to touch his small, soft hand. I could not help but let tears fall. Why are you so moved that you are crying? The Emperor asked softly, using his hand to gently wipe away the tear at the corner of my eye. Looking at his eyes filled with love and affection, I whispered, "This is truly wonderful." I did not expect that what the Emperor gave to mother and child would be more than I ever thought. The legitimate son of the Central Palace was born. The world was granted a general amnesty and the civil service exams were expanded. The third-day bath ceremony was organized extremely grandly. The full month and first-year ceremonies were also prepared lavishly beyond expectations. I vaguely guessed what the Emperor wanted to do, but I also understood that excessive ostentation would only push my son into the center of power struggles. During the third-day bath, the Emperor held the baby facing the civil and military officials and solemnly declared, "This is my legitimate son. Today I name him Leo. I hope that he will." He spoke many words of praise and expectation. Every sentence made everyone respectful. When Daisy carried Leo back to my side, she was endlessly excited. "Your Majesty, you did not see that scene." Outside, crowds of people knelt below the main hall. The Emperor, the little prince with an aura looking down upon all living things. This servant stood by and did not even dare to breathe loudly. Although I was not there, I could still picture the scene in my mind. Looking at my son sleeping soundly after feeding, I silently promised, "I must protect you to grow up safely." The Prime Minister's estate sent a card asking to enter the palace for a visit. When the Emperor asked my opinion, I refused without hesitation. Whatever they wanted to do or say, I did not want to hear. Not meeting was fine. Although Prince Nicholas was excellent, he was only a concubine's son. The Emperor's intentions, the officials could more or less guess. The court began to submit memorials asking the Emperor to establish a crown prince. Some supported the eldest son, while others emphasized the legitimate son. Prince Nicholas was long past the age of capping. In 3 more years, he would be 30. Not only was he an adult, but his reputation was also very good. Establishing the legitimate son was the tradition of the ancestors, but Leo was only a few months old. Whether he could be raised to adulthood was unknown. The Emperor was furious and shouted coldly, "Do you ministers think I am about to die?" The two factions immediately fell silent. Seeing the Emperor's angry face, I cautiously asked, "Your Majesty, what do you intend? Although the ancestor ruled to establish the legitimate son, the child is too young. How can he bear this heavy responsibility?" The Emperor looked at me, his eyes deep in thought for a long time before speaking. "Wait another 2 years, then we will calculate." I immediately understood. Leo had a chance to compete for the position. In just 2 years, he could show his intelligence, and in those 2 years, I had enough time to prepare everything for him. The full moon ceremony was even more solemn than I imagined. Officials and their families came one after another to pay respects to Leo. Wearing bright red clothes, he was held in the Emperor's arms, his big round eyes occasionally blowing bubbles. I took a handkerchief to gently wipe the saliva from his mouth. The Emperor took the handkerchief from my hand and wiped it himself, then carried my son away to introduce him to the royal relatives and officials. I sat leisurely chatting with the ladies, taking the opportunity to observe who could be befriended to create a foundation for Leo's future. The endless palace at night became much livelier since the addition of a little prince. When I finished bathing and stepped out, the Emperor was already waiting. Staying at the endless palace tonight was not only a display of glory and favor but also an expression of affection. I could not refuse, nor did I have a reason to. When emotions surged, he whispered in a hoarse voice, "Call me Arthur." I trembled slightly. My heart was also shaken. Trembling with 70% passion, I blended my rhythm with his. Since I became pregnant, although we had intimacy, I had never seen him so satisfied. Not only physically, but my soul also seemed to be completely possessed by him. He whispered in my ear, "Evie, you are truly passionate today. It was not in vain that I kept myself for you for nearly a year." I did not know if these words were true or false. Throughout that year, he still visited other palaces and stayed at other concubines' places. Even if he truly favored others, I had no intention of being jealous. He was the emperor, I could not control him, nor could I change who he favored or when he got bored. No, perhaps the emperor wanted me to be jealous and fight for favor. Otherwise, he would not have said such words. I hesitated for a long while before carefully asking. Then, Your Majesty, in the future, can you only rest at the endless palace and be my Arthur alone? The emperor chuckled low. Evie, can you be any bolder? If my status were equal to his, I would have dared to be wanton and make demands. But he was a man standing above 10,000 people. How could I have the courage to ask such a thing? How many lives did I have to dare to try? If I lost my solid support, if I fell out of favor and was thrown into the cold palace, what then? I dared not gamble. The emperor did not force me, just patted my back gently to reassure me. Do not think nonsense anymore. Go to sleep. Yes. The prime minister's estate continued to send 2 more cards asking to enter the palace. I called Walter to inquire and learned that Prince Nicholas had taken a secondary consort, and she was pregnant when she entered the door. The so-called deep love turned out to be just that. I mocked. Your Majesty, the matter is not just that. I turned my head to look at Walter with suspicion. He lowered his voice. His wife and the secondary consort had a dispute. In the end, both fell into the water and lost their children. It was truly a play, nothing more, nothing less. But with Isabella's arrogant and foolish personality, it was hard to say who harmed whom. As the Empress, I did not punish Isabella nor reprimand the secondary consort. I only sent some medicinal ingredients over, considering my responsibility fulfilled. But in my heart, a calculation had already arisen. I decided to disregard everything to beg the Emperor for a special favor. My cooking was still a disaster. A chaotic scene that nearly burned down the small kitchen resulted in barely a few dishes. I tried a bite and truly could not swallow it. I took a deep breath and waited for the Emperor. He seemed to have sharp eyes, recognizing at a glance that those dishes were made by me. He specifically tasted them and even praised me with a few words. After the meal, he held Leo, a 2-month-old child. What could he understand? Yet seeing him holding the child and talking, I could hardly believe that this monarch standing above 10,000 people looked like an ordinary father at that moment. After thinking for a long time, I spoke up. Your Majesty, this concubine wants to find a few orphans outside the palace, teach them well, and let them serve Leo. The Emperor said nothing, just stared at me, his gaze seemingly piercing through my soul. I felt guilty but still tried to remain calm. When he agreed, I breathed a sigh of relief. But I did not expect the Emperor to also allow me to enter and leave the palace freely. When he handed me that token, for the first time, I realized how deep his feelings for me were. The Emperor, with supreme power and endless gold and silver, finding a few loyal people to nurture was not difficult. When Leo was 3, I already had a group of trustworthy people in my hands. I dared not say they could change the dynasty, but at least they were enough to protect my son when facing danger. In the battle for the throne, this group of people could help him gain an advantage. But the Emperor did not give me that chance. He had arranged everything thoughtfully. Parents love their children and will plan far ahead. I had never felt love from my parents, so I poured all my heart into loving Leo. And Arthur, although he was the Emperor, I knew he loved our son. He had begun preparing for the establishment of the heir. Just relying on the ancestral rule of establishing the legitimate son, he could easily refute the faction supporting the eldest son. When Leo became the crown prince, he would have Arthur, his imperial father, as support, and loyal people to follow and assist him. I secretly thought, should I give birth to a younger sibling for Leo, so he would not be alone when facing other princes? No. Half a year after Leo was named crown prince, the central palace received good news again. The Empress was pregnant. The Emperor was overjoyed. At his advanced age, he could still have more princes and princesses, proving his health was still very good, and the Emperor needed to maintain face. Evie, take good care of the pregnancy. I smiled at him. He still looked young and full of vitality. In my heart, I secretly hoped he could live a very long time, long enough for Leo to grasp great power and deal with everything himself. By then, I would find a way for him to abdicate. I watched him and Leo talking. He instructed his son to be careful and not to let me be hurt. Exclusively favored in the harem. My legitimate son made crown prince, and now I was pregnant again. Young, beautiful, power in hand, loyal subordinates, and profitable transactions constantly being made. I looked at them and smiled gently, my eyes filled with affection that I myself did not realize. This pregnancy of mine was not stable at all. There were always petty people who wanted me to have no peace, and I did not show mercy to anyone. Being empress for a few years, I had gained some majesty. With those who harmed me, I never showed leniency. What surprised me was that Isabella dared to extend her hand all the way to the endless palace. Then I would not be lenient. Poisoned wine or a white silk strip, I let her choose one of the two. My father and mother finally could not sit still and repeatedly requested an audience. Over the years, we treated each other like strangers, each walking their own path. I did not take benefits from the Prime Minister's estate, and they should not expect to rely on me for glory. I agreed to meet them. Seeing the two of them kneeling on the ground, I realized they had aged and looked much more haggard. It was understandable. Having a daughter who caused trouble everywhere and was arrogant like Isabella must have exhausted them. Stand up. But they did not stand. Your Majesty, Isabella made a big mistake because she was ignorant. We beg your Majesty to be generous and spare her life. I laughed coldly. Father, you sit in the position of Prime Minister. Surely you understand the law. If the victim were not a royal, poisoning and harming the Empress is a crime worthy of confiscating property and executing 3 generations. Is it not? I saw their faces turn pale and continued indifferently. Of course, if father is willing to resign to exchange for Isabella's life, this palace can consider sparing her. I returned the right of choice to him, power or his daughter, he could decide for himself. This scene reminded me of many years ago when they disregarded everything to send me into the palace, not caring about my life or death. Heaven has eyes, finally, the time for retribution has come. Mother cried and begged incessantly. Master, you must save Isabella. Father did not answer or refuse but looked up at me and spoke slowly. Your Majesty, do you not want to know your origins? My origins? I had known them for a long time. My mother was originally a lady of a prestigious family. Because of the crimes of her father and brother, the family declined. She was captured, secretly trained to be a courtesan, and finally became his concubine. For power, he even gave her to the Prince of Luoyang. I recounted my background in an indifferent voice, without any emotion. Being reincarnated into the Sheng family was truly bad luck for 8 lifetimes. Seeing his face constantly changing, I asked, does the Prime Minister want to use my background to threaten me? Then I am truly sorry. I have known all these things for a long time. The Emperor also knows. Even my mother has been welcomed to the capital to recuperate. I asked coldly again. So, Prime Minister, how do you choose? I once again put the decision in his hands. Her Majesty is truly a ruthless person, causing this subject to admire you greatly. I chuckled softly. I agree with this statement. After all, we are father and daughter. The Prime Minister is ruthless and heartless. As a daughter, naturally, I must inherit it. It is just that I do it much better than you. These people forever only covet power and influence, having not a shred of true affection. When there is no conflict of interest, they are a kind father and filially pious children, harmonious and warm. But once there is a dispute, their choice is always what benefits themselves, without hesitation, and certainly without any spirit of sacrifice. After telling them to leave, I stood up and headed toward the Hall of Mental Cultivation. I knew that at this moment Leo was beside Arthur, listening to his imperial father and the ministers discussing court affairs. I just did not expect Leo to be sleeping right next to the dragon throne, while Arthur was gently fanning him. Several ministers sat to the side continuing to discuss border matters. Your Majesty, please sit. I sat down in a corner, intending to say I would take the child back to the palace to rest. But Arthur spoke up. It is fine here. I will go with you all later. The Empress should just sit and rest for a while. When Arthur handled court affairs, he always moved my heart. Calm and sharp, he could always point out the key points most incisively. He held supreme power in his hands, mastering the world, yet was also a diligent and people-loving wise ruler. Beside him, I had felt pampered and indulged, as well as his affection for me. At this moment, he was a husband worthy of respect. For Leo, he was also a good father. On the way back to the Endless Palace, Leo ran ahead playing while Arthur supported me. Did you meet the Prime Minister? I let him choose for himself. Save Isabella's life or keep the position of Prime Minister. Obviously, my father was still a person who coveted power. He chose to keep his position and let Isabella die. Before dying, she even cursed me for being vicious and not thinking of sisterly affection. She thought that since I was fine there was no reason to punish her. Truly stupid to the extreme. When I gave birth to Dragon Phoenix twins, Arthur was truly overjoyed. Just naming the two children, he looked through countless books of classics. Unexpectedly, after calculating every path, no one guessed it would be twins. He wanted to grant a general amnesty to the world again, but I dissuaded him. Criminals are pardoned, but what crime did the victims commit? My Evie is truly benevolent. Me benevolent? No, I have never been a benevolent person. I hold grudges and seek revenge, sparing no one. Filled with calculation and vigilance, enjoying Arthur's indulgence, but also constantly plotting to seize his throne. When I was 34 and Arthur was 63, I was still in my prime, and he was still healthy. When he announced his abdication, I was truly shocked. I am old, and the time I can be with you is getting shorter. Leo has long grown up and can shoulder the responsibility. I am completely at ease handing this land over to him. While I can still walk, I want to go out with you to see the world. You and I have an age difference, yet I selfishly kept you in the palace for so many years. I fear if I do not take you away, there will be no chance left. I threw myself into his arms, not letting him continue. He was truly old, his hair and beard were all white. But in my eyes, he remained as was when we first met, tall and majestic, with an aura surpassing others. He raised his hand to gently wipe away the tears on my face. Throughout the years, whether matters were big or small, right or wrong, he always said 4 words, as you wish. He devoted himself to clearing the path for our children, removing all obstacles. He feared I would be panicked, feared I would worry, allowing me to come to the hall of mental cultivation to hear political affairs, allowing me to go out of the palace to cultivate my own power. Arthur, do not speak nonsense. You will live 100 years. Wherever you go, I will go with you. He smiled and rubbed my head. Hearing you say that, my years have not been in vain. Arthur ultimately could not live to be 100. He passed away at the age of 77. Before leaving, he said he was satisfied with this life. I held his withered hand and brought it up to stroke my face. My Arthur, do not walk too fast down there. Wait for me a little. I told him that the past 32 years had been truly worthwhile for me. He never let me suffer any grievance. Exclusively favored in the harem, my son held power firmly, and my grandchildren were all filial and obedient. He never said he loved me, but every action and every word was filled with love. I did not want him to leave alone. After arranging all the funeral affairs, I put on the outfit he liked best, applied makeup exquisitely and beautifully, swallowed a poison pill, and lay down beside him, peaceful and quiet. I closed my eyes. To have come to this world once, to have walked hand in hand with him for more than 3 decades, was a blessing I had cultivated for several lifetimes. Therefore, I was willing to follow him. I had no regrets. Side story: The Emperor. At 13, I went to battle to kill enemies. By 21, I ascended the throne. The concubines in the harem entered for various reasons. Even the empress was merely the result of weighing pros and cons. On my 39th birthday, having drunk a bit too much, I went to the late pavilion to rest and sober up. At that moment, a little girl, lovely as a rabbit, stumbled in with an innocent look. Her face was flushed red. From afar, I could smell the hot breath as if burning from her body. She panicked and threw herself before me, begging for help. Please, save me. She was truly just a small doll, about the age of my princesses. Initially, I intended to order someone to find an imperial physician to examine her. Unexpectedly, she pressed her cheek against my palm and sighed in relief. She was not drunk but drugged by someone. Who on earth was so vicious to lay hands on a child? She gripped my hand tightly, sobbing softly, her mouth constantly complaining of pain and discomfort. Her pitiful and weak appearance softened my heart, no matter how hard it was. I originally intended to let a palace maid take her back, but she held on tight and refused to let go. Why am I not loved by my parents? Clearly, we are all their children. I really wanted to tell her that because the human heart is inherently biased, favoritism is common. But looking at that pitiful appearance, I finally could not bear to be cruel. Afterwards, I ordered someone to take her to the rockery in the imperial garden, making it look like she was drunk and had fallen asleep. I also knew she was the second legitimate daughter of the prime minister's estate. At home, she was not loved by her father or mother. Her name was Evelyn, a little girl who had not yet understood the world. After returning to the estate, she fell ill and forgot everything that happened that night. I thought forgetting was good. It was not a happy event anyway. It was just that after the illness, she became depressed and uninterested in everything. Remembering that pitiful look of hers that night, I wrote a letter and used a pigeon to send it to her. She replied very quickly. Small, beautiful words written neatly, carrying the innocence of a young girl, but also the sadness of someone unloved. I almost watched her grow up through those letters, from innocent to resilient. I encouraged her to read more books and plan for herself. She said her calligraphy was sold for money. She said people bought her paintings too. Every sentence in the letter was filled with joy. I looked at the paintings and calligraphy hanging on the wall and took some time to reply, encouraging her to try harder. Truly, she was a girl easily satisfied. I protected her like that without any thought of crossing the line. But I worried for her. If the events of that night were exposed, how would she face it? It was from that night that I began to feel disgusted with the concubines in the harem, women who smiled gently to my face but dared to do such filthy things behind my back. Hearing that her coming-of-age ceremony was organized very hastily and simply, I could not help but feel heartache, so I sent her a jade hairpin, wishing her a happy birthday. She replied but returned the jade hairpin. The letter paper was still stained with a few tear streaks. Only after investigating did I know her coming-age ceremony had been completely ruined. Truly a pitiful girl. I thought for a long time and finally decided to bring her into the palace, appointing her as the Empress of the Central Palace, the mother of the nation. At the same time, I wanted to test Prime Minister Sheng to see how much love he had for this daughter. But the result only disappointed me. Those who scheme for power have no room in their hearts for familial affection. Thinking back on myself, how much true feeling did I have for the harem concubines? How much love did I have for the princes and princesses? When weighing benefits, they were just sacrificial pawns. This time, I wanted to hand the decision to her. How she wanted to live her life, she could choose for herself. Meeting again, the little girl from back then had grown up. She looked at others with red eyes, carrying a bit of shyness. But in her eyes was resilience and determination. She truly dared to speak up. Empress of the Central Palace, entering from the Solar Gate. Looking at her pitiful appearance, with wounds on her hands and neck, I finally could not bear to refuse. A child unloved by parents, if no one protects her, is truly too pitiful. The world is at peace. Power is firmly in my hands, and I am much older than her. To let her suffer more grievances, I could not bear it. As you wish. Receiving her pigeon letter saying she would enter the palace and asking not to contact anymore, my heart suddenly felt choked. I did not know if it was heartache or another feeling, yet there was a bit of inexplicable joy. The days preparing for the grand wedding, I truly could not sit still. That servant Walter dared to tease his emperor. It was like an old fire meeting a new wind, burning uncontrollably. The harem concubines mumbled that this was against the rules and etiquette. Nonsense. This land is mine. Whatever I want to do, why do I need to discuss rules and etiquette? They are simply sour grapes, ruining what they cannot have. Did they not see that the civil and military officials dared not utter a word? This is the Empress, not a showgirl, how can they be the same? The Emperor and Empress's grand wedding. I hoped that one day when she looked back, she would not feel forced to enter the palace. At least compared many men in the world, what I could give her was not only glory and wealth but also love. She was very tense, even afraid and panicked. While drinking the nuptial wine, her body trembled ceaselessly. I knew she was afraid. She was just a little girl with nowhere to rely on. Although she tried to be calm and hide her fear, I could still see the confusion in her heart and her resistance to entering the palace and to me. But she had no way to resist. On the wedding night, when she begged me to call her Evie, my heart felt a pang of pain for the first time. The days after the grand wedding were truly very comfortable. My beloved wife was gentle and suited my wishes perfectly. Naturally, I spoiled and loved her immensely. As for her father, he bet everything on Prince Nicholas. It was not that I looked down on Prince Nicholas, but this throne would not be his turn no matter how things spun. Previously, I thought I would let them fight for this throne, but ever since I saw a gentle little girl in front of the endless palace gate with warm eyes and a faint smile on her lips, I became somewhat biased. However, I could not reveal this bias too early. When she said she wanted to go to the state temple to offer incense and pray for blessings, I thought of the talkative and annoying abbot there and felt annoyed, but since my empress wanted to go, as a husband, naturally I had to accompany her. Seeing her kneel in the great hall of the Buddha just to pray for a peace talisman, chanting and praying, then placing the talisman in a sachet tied to my belt. In my heart I was shaken. I remembered the abbot's words, "A steady heart and firm will make everything succeed." This old monk finally said something pleasing to the ear. Toiling day and night, eventually there must be a result. There are some things I can wait for, but she may not be able to. To stand firm in the harem, my favor alone is not enough. She also needs children. Even if I suddenly fall, she will have someone to rely on. When I learned she was pregnant, I did not say it out loud, but in my heart, I was as happy as anyone. Of course, there were many shady matters in the harem. Protecting this child also required a lot of effort. Guarding against everyone, the hardest to guard against were the people in one's own house. There were always those who wanted to challenge me. Since they did not want to live peacefully, then they could just die. My hands were already stained with the blood of my own brothers. Adding a few lives of concubines was nothing worth mentioning. This time, I expected more than anyone else. Although I had many children, they were all born of concubines. This was the first child born of my legitimate wife. When she went into labor, I could see how terrified she was. Her calling, "My Arthur," every word shattered my heart. My heart tightened with every wave of her pain. Fortunately, this child was very sensible and did not make his mother suffer too long. At the age of 47, I finally had my first legitimate son. I gave him more love and expectation than all the other princes and princesses combined. For the first time, I understood what love was, loving my wife, loving my child. When she said she wanted to find a few trustworthy and capable people for Leo, I agreed without hesitation and even gave her a lot of power. When Leo was named crown prince, in her hands she had both money and people to use. Her eyes when looking at me gradually lit up. That kind of affection she did not realize herself wrapped around her bit by bit, tightly winding around her heart. When she became pregnant again, I was overjoyed. I only hated that I could not immediately announce it to the whole world, so everyone would know I was still healthy and strong, able to be with her for many, many more years. I wanted to take her out of the palace to see the vast world even more, not just confined to the capital region. When I saw Leo had grown up in the hall of mental cultivation, he was truly intelligent. He learned early how to manage subordinates, approve memorials, and handle court affairs. Wait until he is capable enough to independently shoulder the burden, even suppressing his royal brothers into submission. My temples were graying. I could not wait any longer. Waiting more, I did not know until which year or month. Early abdication to travel everywhere with her was the most important thing. My Arthur. Hearing her call, I immediately paid, holding the hairpin I just bought and walking up to her like offering a treasure. "I just bought this, do you like it?" Her eyes shone shockingly bright. A woman over 30, yet beautiful and radiant like a flower in full bloom. Charming and seductive. "I like it." She spoke while signaling for me to help her pin it in her hair. Right in the middle of the crowd, she suddenly stood on tiptoe and placed a light kiss on my cheek. "Thank you, my Arthur. I like it very much. Truly bold." I immediately laughed like a fool, happily running after her, my steps light as air. The story of Evelyn and Arthur reminds us that we are not defined by the circumstances of our birth, but by the courage of our choices. Though born into a family that treated her as a merely disposable pawn, Evelyn refused to be a victim, demanding dignity in the face of despair. It teaches us that true love is not about possession, but about empowering one another. A silent guardian who clears the path and whispers, "As you wish." Ultimately, the most profound power lies not in the throne, but in finding a partner who cherishes your soul when the world only sees your utility. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.